Snow powdered the porch as I shouldered my suitcase and pushed open the door that used to spill music. At the kitchen table, my grandmother sat in her faded cardigan, spooning cold stuffing from mismatched containers. Beside her, a folded note waited like a sealed winter. The house breathed dust and memory. I set down my keys and listened to the absence. When did Christmas become a room where only the forgotten gathered this late alone? Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from. Tap like and subscribe if this story already touches a nerve, and stay with me, because the next thing I opened wasn't a gift, and it changed everything I thought I knew about my family. The highway home ran like a ribbon of salt and light across the plains. I drove with the heater thumping against my knees and the radio throwing out songs I used to hum while baking pies on Christmas Eve. I pictured it now, the old tree assembled before dawn by someone else for a change. Strings of bulbs nested like bright birds in its branches, a fire catching with that soft crackle my kids loved when they were 6 and 9 and believed in every miracle I manufactured. I kept catching myself smiling into the windshield, then pulling it back as if I had reached for something hot. Hope is funny that way. My expectations were small and specific this year. 1 unhurried breakfast, 2 real hugs, a walk past the pond, with the cattails trapped in ice, my grandmother's cardigan smelling like ivory soap when I leaned in. The porch light was off when I parked. That was the first wrong note. The second was the doormat rolled half under the door as if someone had kicked it without noticing. Inside, the air had the stale cold of a refrigerator, the kind of quiet that makes your jaw clench. I pulled off my gloves and cradled my hands together. The house didn't answer back. It used to answer skittering of feet, smell of butter browning the snort of the old heater, and a chorus of, "You're here." I walked through suitcase wheels, sighing. The living room sat undecorated boxes of ornaments stacked in a leaning tower where the tree should have been. A vacuum cord looped across the rug like a line drawn mid-argument. No evergreen, no gingerbread, no little village lit from within. I stood in the doorway long enough to feel the familiarity sour into something else. In the kitchen, the fluorescent hum was the only sound until I saw her. Grandma was smaller than last spring, a cardigan buttoned to her throat slippers splayed at the toes. She had one hand on a plastic fork and the other around a container with a deli label. Turkey maybe, though it had gone flat and gray on top. And there beside her plate was that folded note, thick paper, neat corners. Not my handwriting, not the loops my mother used to make when she wrote lists I would later find on the counter, curl-cornered and stained with coffee. I said, "Hey!" She looked up slowly, as if climbing stairs. The skin around her eyes had thinned to a translucency that let the blue show like lake ice. "You made good time," she said. "Is everyone at the church?" I asked. "Rehearsal." Her gaze lowered to the note and then went back to her fork. "Eat," she said. "You should eat first." So I stood by the stove and told myself not to demand answers I might not want. I told myself to make the best of it, to be the reasonable one, my old role, that worn coat. But relief didn't come. A question did. Why was she alone in this kitchen, eating cold food in a dark house on Christmas Eve? And why was the note still folded? I hung my coat on the chair back and watched her chew slow. Steady, with that stubborn dignity she carried through every storm. I thought of the call I didn't return last week, the one where my daughter had said, "We're figuring out logistics, Mom," and how I had let the silence sit. Standing there, I thought logistics is another word for priority, and I was about to learn where I ranked. I opened the fridge. 2 takeout containers, a jar of pickles, half a carton of eggs. Cold air rolled across my hands. It smelled like nothing. Holidays always smell like something vanilla cinnamon, a pine faintness that rides the heat. This smelled like a room that had chosen to forget. When I sat at the table across from Grandma, she put down the fork. "Don't mind me," she said and dabbed at her mouth with a thin napkin. "I started without you." "How long have you been here tonight?" I asked. She shrugged. The cardigan shifted on her frame. "Since the afternoon. Didn't they?" The word they landed in my mouth like a fishbone. "Didn't anyone?" She rubbed her thumb against the plastic lid round and round, as if polishing it might make it nicer. She didn't answer, and in that non-answer, there was already a story I didn't want to hear. "Okay," I said too brightly. "Maybe we caught a bad moment. Maybe they stepped out." Hope again, trying to repaint. Grandma looked at the note. It had a presence out of proportion to its size. She didn't touch it. She didn't push it toward me or away. She just let it sit between us, white and exact, like the pause in an argument when both sides realize there's no clever line that will fix what's been said. "Eat something," she said. "You drove a long way." I made toast because it was the easiest way to warm the room. The smell edged out the emptiness by one small inch. When I turned back, Grandma had arranged the containers into a neat line, labels facing one direction, as if they needed discipline. "Do you remember the year you made that cranberry relish with oranges?" she asked. "I do," I said. "Your sister said it tasted like Christmas morning." Grandma smiled, and then put the smile away as if it belonged in a drawer. She had a way with words. She did. The toaster clicked. The toast popped. I buttered the slices one at a time, the knife clinking lightly against the rim of the plate. Ordinary noises. I waited for the house to catch one and build it into something larger the way it used to do. It didn't. That was the disappointment. No one talks about the moment you realize the house is only a house without people, and all your preparations were a kind of spell that required believers. I sat and ate half a slice out of politeness. Grandma watched me the way you watch a bird come to the feeder after a storm. "You look tired," she said. "Tired is accurate," I said. "But I'm here now." She patted the table, then withdrew her hand. "I'm glad you're here." "Me too." She glanced again at the note, and then away like it was a candle she didn't want to light because it would change the room. I decided I would not ask. Not yet. I would let the night soften before I pried. I would be for just 1 hour a granddaughter at a kitchen table, which is the safest place I've ever known. But even as I told myself that the silence kept filling the spaces where voices should have gone, and the angel without a tree watched from the mantel, and my toast cooled in my hand, the first disappointment is quiet. I rinsed the plate and left it in the drying rack because the dishwasher had been pulled away from the wall unplugged, as if someone had started a repair and forgotten. And this one said, "A celebration," diverted a decision made quickly the mess-proof of the speed. Grandma washed her fork and set it in the tin holder exactly where it belonged. That was her way to put one thing right when the big thing was out of reach. I stood beside her and dried the plastic container with a towel clean from the drawer. "Remember when I thought we needed to make 6 pies?" I asked. I was always trying to fill every plate and every silence. She chuckled, a sound like paper folding. "You were making armor," she said. "You didn't know it, but you were." I thought about the holidays when the children were little and their father would show up late after the dishes smelling of new cologne I hadn't bought. How my son would climb into my lap for the last story of the night, his hair damp from the bath, and how I would smooth the towel over his head while watching the window for headlights that wouldn't appear. I made lists and casseroles and small miracles because that's what I understood love to be, labor that looked effortless. But the cracks had always been their hairlines at first. The year the kids left early because someone's girlfriend's mother had better stockings. The year my daughter suggested we rotate houses, even though I lived 10 minutes from everyone else. The year after the divorce, when they called on the 27th instead and spoke of blended schedules as if life were a smoothie you could pour into any cup. I returned to the kitchen. The note was still a white square in my periphery. I could feel it like a draft. Who left it, I asked, and the gauntness of the house answered before she did. Your daughter, she said, eyes on the fork holder. She wrote it on the good paper. The kind you use for graduations and condolences. My mouth went dry. When? This morning? Did they say where they were going? She picked up the container again and dried the rim with a neat paper towel until it squeaked under her thumb. It says they went to celebrate properly. That's the phrase she used. Celebrate properly. I felt the echo of every time I had ironed their shirts and rehearsed their lines and stood at the back of auditoriums so cameras wouldn't catch me crying. Properly. I had done everything properly for years, as if there were points to be tallied. I had the sudden desire to stand on the porch and scream a word that wasn't proper at all. I didn't read it, Grandma added quickly, seeing me move toward the table. I didn't want to open it without you. You've been looking at it all day and you didn't. It wasn't mine to read, she said. Then, after a moment, and I thought maybe if I didn't open it, it could still say something different. She had always been honest like that, never pretending hope wasn't a kind of superstition. I sat and rested my fingertips on the paper. Texture can tell you what someone meant. This stock was heavy chosen, bought on purpose, the kind of paper that asks to be taken seriously. A care that made the content more cruel, I'd soon learn. Before you open it, Grandma said, touching my wrist lightly. Maybe think about what you want to do after. I turned my hand and held her fingers. They were warm bones like sparrows. I don't know what's in it, I said. You know enough, she said. You can feel it. She wasn't wrong. The house had told us all afternoon. I felt heat rise under my coat. I thought of all the clever replies I could write on the back, sharp little syllables that would bruise as they landed. I breathed instead. The kitchen clock ticked like a metronome, marking the tempo of my restraint. Grandma's hand was still on my wrist. It's not your fault, she said. Fault is so tidy a word for a thing this messy. They left you here, I said. I wasn't going to spoil your arrival with a phone call, she said simply. I wanted to see your face before you saw the page. It's a page, I said, and couldn't finish the sentence. Because it wasn't just a page. It was a ledger where a family tallied value and came up with a number too small to cart to the party. The note trembled in my hands, then steadied. I read it again. The sentences felt practiced. Please don't make this bigger than it is. That line was a net intended to catch my anger and drag it into the mud where it would be called unreasonable. I recognized the tactic. I'd had it used on me by a husband who missed dinners and also by managers who called me reliable when they meant invisible. Reliable people are the first ones excused from joy they can be counted on not to complain. We sat in silence. The refrigerator rattled once, then went still. I pictured Devon's parents' house, long table, good china, a tree big enough to touch the ceiling, laughter rising and falling like a proper tide. Maybe there was a game of charades, napkins folded into swans the new baby passed from arm to arm. I pictured my daughter laughing at a joke that made me feel old the last time I heard it. I pictured my son nodding along as if he weren't capable of fury. I pictured all of it, and then I pictured this kitchen, 2 women, 1 old one, no longer young, and a note. I should have called, I said, and then hated myself for saying it. Because the truth is, presents shouldn't be a negotiation for people you have held at 2 a.m. when fevers ran out of them like rain. Presence isn't an RSVP in a group thread. Presence is the promise we make by naming one another family. Grandma blinked slowly. We can sit here and count what didn't happen, she said gently, or we can decide what will. An answer rose up so clear it surprised me. I want to keep this, I said, and slid the note back into its envelope for later. Not to reread, not to martyr myself, to remember. Some truths should be kept whole. Outside, the snow began again, an unexpected squall sweeping across the yard. The porch light flipped on automatically as daylight failed. It threw a circle of butter yellow at the top of the steps, the only soft thing in sight. I guess they didn't think I'd come, I said. They didn't think about me at all, Grandma said. She said it without bitterness. As a fact, among other facts. I pressed my lips together so I wouldn't say that they had learned this from their grandfather. From years of seeing my efforts dismissed as logistics, my feelings arranged after everyone else's. The tightness in my chest wasn't just grief. It was recognition. People will treat you like you treat yourself. My children had watched me for a long time, and this was the lesson they had taken. The table waited between us. The angel on the mantel tilted slightly as if listening. What now? I asked. Now Grandma said we decide whether we're waiting for them or living anyway. I went down the hallway to the closet that held the ornament boxes. The air had the chalky smell of old cedar. I pulled out the top bin, the one with the snowflake cutouts, and set it in the living room. Plastic cracked softly as I unlatched the lid. A wave of cinnamon and dust and faint perfume rose like a ghost of all the years I had tried to build. I took out the first ornament, a paper circle laminated poorly around my son's second-grade smile. The edges bubbled where the iron had been too hot. I tried not to feel the memory as an indictment. I could have called them. I could have asked clearer questions. I could have said I matter. Instead, I had taken pride in requiring nothing in being the low-maintenance mother, in making holidays out of leftovers and coupons. I told myself that restraint was elegance, but looking at the ornament in my hand, I finally let myself ask the questions I had been folding away for years. When did I stop demanding a seat at the table I built? When did I accept that gratitude was a luxury I couldn't afford? When did I confuse endurance with love? Back in the kitchen, the note sat like a small white stone. I lifted it again and slid it into the drawer with the batteries and the tape measure. Not to hide it, to put it in the place where we keep things we reach for when something won't work. A record of a problem that needed a different tool. I walked to the front window. Out on the street, a neighbor's kid dragged a sled up a shallow slope in their yard cheeks, lifted red against the scarf. The mother waved at no one in particular, then looked across at our house and noticed the dark. I stepped back so she wouldn't see me watching. Pride is stubborn, even when your hands are shaking. The phone sat on the counter. I thought of calling my daughter and hearing her say, "Mom, we already left. We didn't realize. Next year?" I thought of calling my son and hearing him say, "I'm sorry it got complicated," as if those words were a blanket you could tuck around a woman who had lain awake 100 December nights waiting for the sound of a key. I imagined the noise of happy people behind them, a baby squealing in delight at a toy that played a tinny song. I hung up the phone without dialing. "Sweetheart," Grandma said from the doorway, "you've stood in that exact spot every Christmas since you were 20. I always wondered what you were looking for out that window." "Headlights," I said. It came out close to a laugh and closer to a sob. She came to stand beside me, shorter now, enough that my shoulder made a wall for her to rest against. "What do you see tonight? A light I can turn on myself?" I said, surprising us both. She nodded and gave the smallest smile. That's a good start. I looked at the boxes of lights on the floor, the tangle that always took an hour to unknot. I used to curse the loops and promise myself I'd put them away carefully next time. I never did. I was always too tired. Holidays were a stage, and I was the road crew tearing down after midnight. I wanted them here, I won't lie about that. I wanted my daughter to walk in with an apology easy and unadorned. I wanted my son to fling his arms around me and say, "We messed up, Mom." I wanted it so much my throat hurt. But I also wanted something I hadn't let myself want a Christmas I didn't have to beg for. A Christmas that wasn't a test of how little I could require. I went to the garage and found the old tree in its two parts, the trunk section and the top. I carried them in and set them where the rug had a faint circle from years of needles. The stand complained as I tightened the screws. When I lifted the top into place, it clicked with a small, perfect sound, as if the tree were agreeing to stand even without an audience. "Want help?" Grandma asked, hands already reaching. "Yes," I said. The word felt like a warm coat. We began with the lights. I held the plug she fed me loops. The first string blinked obediently. The second hesitated and then went dim along the middle like a tired smile. "We'll patch it," she said, and I laughed for real. For an hour we circled that tree, the house learning us again. The angel on the mantel watched until I lifted her and gave her a place to wait. In the kitchen, I put a pot on the stove and pulled flour from the canister, butter from its paper, sugar from the jar Grandma kept with a tiny teacup inside for scooping. Nothing fancy. Biscuits and a pan gravy with thyme from the jar I dried in August. In the old skillet, butter slid to the edges and came back as foam. The heat made the room smell like home without anyone's permission. Grandma set plates hands sure despite the tremor that came sometimes when she reached too far. We ate at the table without the note between us. We put a small radio on low and let a station from the college town drift in songs I knew by heart and new ones that sounded like winter with a beat. We didn't make speeches. We didn't make do. We made a meal, and the fork clinked against the plate, ordinary and right. After we cleaned up, I brought the ornament boxes in and opened them all the way. Some trinkets were chipped. Some held photos I wasn't ready to look at. We chose carefully the crocheted snowflakes my mother made the year the pipes burst. A paper dove my daughter cut when she was 4, one wing, stapled where glue had failed. A wooden star carved by a man who sold them at the craft fair and told me his wife was the one who insisted on the glitter. Each piece was small and stubborn proof that beauty survives handling. "Let's not do matching garland," I said. "Let's make it look like us." "Crooked and shining," she said, and we both smiled. When the branches were full enough, I carried the angel to the top and stood on the old chair. The wood creaked, but held. I lifted her high in the circle of our homemade lights and placed her carefully, the bent wing facing the wall so her good side looked forward. When I stepped down and saw the hole, I didn't cry. I didn't need to. The room had changed temperature. It had our attention on it again, and rooms respond to that. Warmth is complicated, but sometimes it begins with two people catching the same note. On the counter, the envelope waited where I had slid it. I took it out not to read again, but to decide what it would be. I set it on a saucer and lit a candle, the short kind with a steady wick. I held the edge of the paper in the heat until the corner browned, then curled. Wax pooled on the saucer and took the ash into itself. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't declare anything. I let the flame do the quiet work of turning one kind of thing into another. "Not burning it up," Grandma said, watching. "Changing its shape." "Exactly," I said. We sat on the couch afterward with mugs of tea that tasted faintly of apples. The radio hummed. The tree shone with our choices. For the first time in a long time, I felt the inside of the holiday. instead of standing just outside it managing the door. We told a few old stories, the kind you only tell when there's no one to correct the details. She told me how she met my grandfather under a barn roof while the rain sang on the aluminum. I told her how at 18, I decided to leave town and then stayed because someone cried, and I thought my staying might teach them I loved them. We were gentle with ourselves in those tellings. We let the past be a place we survived without letting it be the only map. Around 10, my phone buzzed on the counter. I didn't move. It buzzed again harder, as if the caller could will the distance closed by vibration. When I finally picked it up, there were 2 missed calls and a text that said, "We didn't realize you were going there." Next time with a snowman emoji that landed like a stone. I plugged the phone into the charger and faced the tree. I wasn't staging a punishment. I wasn't making them pay. I was choosing the present tense. Morning came with a blue-gray light, the sky smooth as a sheet. The house breathed differently. The tree winked sleepy little eyes. In the kitchen, the pans still smelled like thyme and pepper, and the cups we had left upside down on a towel gleamed with that scrubbed shine my mother always demanded for guests. We were our own guests. I poured oatmeal into a pot and sliced an apple thin. When Grandma shuffled in, she wore a sweater I hadn't seen since my children were small. A tiny snag ran down the left sleeve. She smoothed it and sat. We ate without scraping our spoons. I used to think holidays were tests, I said. You either passed by making everyone happy, or you failed and promised to try again next year. What are they now? She asked. Proof that love survives without an audience, I said. She sipped her tea and nodded. It always did, she said. You just didn't feel allowed to notice. Outside, the plow grumbled down the street, pushing snow in a tidy wave. The porch light clicked off as the day finally convinced the sensor it had arrived. I stood in the doorway and watched the small, ordinary world go on the neighbor dragging their trash can after the truck. A runner, lifting her knees high to avoid slush. A kid in a red hat solemnly pressing a cookie cutter into a pan of snow to make a star. The scene didn't need me to interpret it. It just needed me to be here. I took the saucer from the counter and held it to the window. The candle had trapped the ash of the note in wax-gray wisps suspended like weather inside glass. It wasn't an altar. It wasn't a curse. It was a reminder that paper can be rewritten, and so can rolls. The mother who made herself small to fit a room that never expanded learned to step to the center and stand there even if she stood with only one other person. Especially then. My phone lit up again, apologies that were really explanations, offers that were really delays. I typed exactly what I meant. We are fine. We made Christmas. We'll see how next week looks. No exclamation points, no summary of pain, no begging. I sent it and set the phone face down. Grandma reached for my hand. You don't need their permission to matter, she said, same as last night, but now it landed in a place that could hold it. You never did. I know, I said. And I did. The knowing wasn't a triumphal shout. It was the quiet kind that lets you breathe differently. We spent the day doing small, unremarkable things that added up, washing the good glasses, polishing the reindeer's remaining horn, writing a grocery list that wasn't a plea, but a plan. We put the angel's box on a lower shelf where we could reach it without a chair. We folded the cardigan she had worn last night and set it within reach instead of back in the cedar closet where moths wait to love what you forget. By afternoon, the light slanted gold across the rug. It caught the jar where I had poured the cooled wax and ash. I set that jar on the mantel, not center. Off to the side where you only notice if you're looking for what changed you. As dusk gathered, I felt the ache arrive, the old ache that said, This was supposed to be different. On the radio, a voice said something about a storm farther north. The tree hummed. The house, which had felt like a museum yesterday, felt like a place again. Here is what I learned, and I offer it without prescription. Some notes will be written without you. Some celebrations will be constructed around spaces where your chair should go. Some people will confuse your patience with disappearance. But you are not required to audition for love every December. You can build a holiday with who shows up 2 people, 1 person just you, and it will be real because you are. If this story found you, tap like so it can find someone else, subscribe for more true quiet victories, and share it with a friend who needs permission to choose herself. Thank you for spending this time with me. May your next holiday be built from dignity, served warm, and eaten in good company, even if it's your own.